Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about this morning, including we have a new Twitter files drop, this one courtesy of Li Feng of The Intercept, looking at how left-wing protesters were targeted by Big Pharma for censorship. So that is an interesting one. We also have some updates on exactly how the potential Republican primary field for 2024 is shaping up. Some very intriguing new developments there. Updates out of Ukraine, digging into what exactly we can expect as we head into the spring. This is a fascinating story. So ChatGPT is freaking out a lot of university professors.
Oh, yeah.
They're sort of like upending their syllabi,
I believe.
Yes, figuring out how to deal with this new technology. So we'll talk to you about that. We've also got a little more airline chaos and some insights into exactly what the hell happened with that ground stop previously. Great guest on to talk to us about big food, something we have been digging into this year. But before we get to any of that, live show.
Live show. Put it up there on the screen. Paramount Theater, February 3rd, Austin, Texas. At this point, you guys know the spiel. The link for tickets is down in the description of this video and or the podcast if you are listening over there. We've got a great show planned for all of you. Don't miss it. Only a couple of tickets left. But with that, let's get to the Twitter files. This is a very important story, arguably one of the most important ones yet that has come out from the Twitter files. Been waiting a lot about COVID, vaccines, how exactly all of that came together. Li Feng of The Intercept got full access. Just to preclude this, he says that he had no, guidance or anything like that whatsoever. He had full scope and the ability to search the Twitter files and the archives himself. So let's put this up there on the screen.
He searched, just to be clear, he searched them. He put in a request with a lawyer.
Yes, that's
right.
The
lawyer would provide the results, and he also indicated he tried to do some additional reporting to corroborate what he was given from
just
Twitter.
to
be totally
allay anybody who's saying, oh, he was handed this, etc. He says, quote, new piece from the Twitter files, how the pharmaceutical industry lobbied social media to shape content around vaccine policy. The push included direct pressure from Pfizer partner biotech to censor activists demanding low-cost generic vaccines for low-income countries. In 2020, it was clear that the pandemic would require rapid innovation. Early on, there was a push to make that solution equitable, an international partnership to share ideas, technology, and new forms of medicine to solve the crisis. But global drug giants saw the crisis as an opportunity for unprecedented profit. Behind closed doors, Pharma launched a massive lobbying blitz to crush any effort to share patents or IP for new COVID-related medicine, including therapeutics and vaccines. The lobbying group that represents biopharma, including Moderna and Pfizer, wrote to the newly elected Biden administration demanding any U.S. government-sanctioned country attempting to violate patent rights and create generic low-cost COVID medicine or vaccines, which brings us to Twitter. The global lobbying blitz included direct pressure on social media. Biotech, which developed Pfizer's vaccine, reached out to Twitter to request that Twitter directly censor users tweeting at them to ask for generic, low-cost vaccines. The reps responded quickly, and it was backed up by the German government. And a lobbyist in Europe specifically asked the content moderation to censor the accounts of Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and of activist hashtags. The potential fake accounts that Twitter monitored for protesting Pfizer were actually real people. He has one of the, those included of those. He actually spoke to this gentleman. It's a 74-year-old retired bricklayer in the United Kingdom. It's not yet clear what exactly the actions that Twitter took on this particular request. Several employees actually said in subsequent messages that none of the activism constituted abuse, but that the company continued to, quote, monitor tweets. Additionally, Pfizer and Moderna's lobbying group fully funded a, quote, special content moderation campaign, which was called the Public Goods Project, and worked with Twitter to set content moderation specifically around, quote, COVID misinformation. They spent some $1.2 million on the campaign, according to their own tax firms. The PGP campaign, which is called Stronger, helped Twitter create content moderation bots, select which public health accounts got verification, helped crowdsource content takedowns, and many of the tweets that they were focused on, some were genuinely like vaccine misinformation around microchips, but others were in a much grayer area, including vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, policies that coerce vaccination, and finally, The Moderna campaign included direct, regular emails, actually with lists of tweets compiled by this lobbying organization to take down and others to verify. An example specifically of one of those emails included in the correspondence. I mean, overall, Crystal, I don't know how you can't say that this is one of the most evil things yet that we have seen from Big Pharma. Like, look, even if you dispute or whatever on the vaccine, they clearly got together to try and make it so that any discussion of low-cost generic therapeutics, ivermectin obviously comes to mind, efficacy regardless. At the time, it was certainly up for debate, certainly along with generic low-cost vaccines that were trying to be utilized by third world countries with generic pharmaceutical infrastructure like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and specifically these companies to protect their own bottom line and profit with U.S. government-developed technology, worked with Twitter in order to censor any discussion around that, something you cared about quite a bit at the time.
Yeah, I mean, we covered this quite extensively, and part of what we covered was the fact that the pharmaceutical companies were out and out lying about what the impact of having, no patents and the ability of other countries to be able to manufacture these, what that impact would be, and their capability to be able to achieve that. I mean, they were saying like, oh no, they're not. It's not possible. They don't have the technology to do it. And meanwhile, there was reporting in a number of outlets of like, no, there is a factory sitting here ready that could spin up millions of doses at low cost. They just need the recipe. They just need the patents lifted in order to be able to do that. Was any of that Big Pharma misinformation flagged or taken down? No, it was not. And that's part of what Lee lays out if you put up this next piece up on the screen in his write-up here for The Intercept about how exactly this all went down. This public goods project that was funded by Big Pharma, Pharma said, oh, they just had a broad mandate. Anything they saw that was misinformation, they were meant to flag. Well, I mean, first of all, it's problematic that any of these groups has special access to start with. So let's begin with that. But then when you dig into what they were flagging, did they ever, in a single instance, flag the misinformation and the lies that were coming from Big Pharma? Of course not. But there was this effort to silence activists who were pushing for low-cost generic vaccines worldwide. And listen, all of these things exist on a spectrum. So I don't think any of this should be censored, but there are better and worse arguments that can be made for, things that are just out and out false. Okay, there's an argument to be. Do I agree with that argument? No, but there's an argument to be made. Things that are in the gray area, as Lee puts it, about really policy debate. I mean, I actually don't think that there is a good argument that you can make about that. Something like activists who are trying to hold powerful actors to account, and you're doing everything you can to silence them, that is just, I mean, there is no argument anyone could make in good faith in that direction. Now, I do want to say, Lee points out, it's not clear what actions Twitter did or did not take in response to these requests. But he had a quote from a guy named Nick Dearden from Global Justice Now about these efforts to silence activists on lifting vaccine patents in particular. And I thought he made a good point. He said, listen, to try and stifle digital dissent during a pandemic, when tweets and emails are some of the only forms of protest available to those locked in their homes, is deeply sinister. And I think that's a great point. These sorts of efforts at any time are deeply sinister, but especially at a time when you're limited in the forms of protest you're able to ultimately make.
That's all we had at the time. I mean, and even today, the idea that one of the reasons that Twitter even matters, why do we cover it for you good people over there, is because it has a massive impact on the debate, on the way that public health authorities are thinking. It's like a glass view into exactly the hive mind of whatever the establishment is thinking. Being able to penetrate that hive mind is deeply important. And we can't brush aside even the policy debate, because you have to consider this, which is vaccine mandates have a direct, bottom line benefit to these vaccine manufacturers. If they are going to create COVID misinformation policy against vaccine passports, against vaccine mandates, and they're specifically advocating against policy which would impact their bottom line, look, all of this could have been easily allayed. We could have probably had a much better conversation if there was no profit even to be had by the company, right? Okay, so that's number one. So if profit is going to be introduced, then you cannot be colluding with the digital town square in order to make sure that you are taking off anything, even policy that you claim was in the best interest of your patients, your customers, really your customers. That's what all of us are, whenever you're interjecting yourself directly into a policy debate. So I find this entirely despicable all the way around. I really do believe this might be one of the most important Twitter files, aside from the very first ones around FBI and government censorship. Why? Because it just shows you directly, like a multi-billion-dollar industry through the fuse of government and lobbying campaigns working with these people to create the rules. The rules are everything. That's the game in which all of us get to play, and it's a game that we don't have even a say of how it is. I've never seen a more perfect example of like how systems can be rigged. And you also have to take it, I think, an even step back further from there, which is, what does a true and honest, open COVID debate look like outside of vaccine profits? We really have no idea. Like, how much closer does Paxlovid and therapeutics come to the fore? Do we even have discussions around vaccine mandates? I mean, in terms of the license for these doctors and others to not feel silenced in putting out alternative therapies or really just all kinds of experimentation, which, Frank, again, is what you want in the middle of a public health crisis. I have no idea what that looks like, but I think we can be fairly certain that this same regime existed on Instagram. I know for sure. Anytime I used to post anything about COVID on Instagram, even to this day, actually, still get flagged. My account also hasn't gotten any followers. Both of our accounts have been suspiciously kind of tracked, and I think we have to suspect that it had some sort of impact, I think, on all the tech companies, and this is just a clear view into what that looks like, Crystal.
Part of why I think this one is so important is because, I mean, look, we're about to cover another story about the vaccines and new data, raising new questions mark. Like, science isn't just a thing where it's like, okay, you get an answer and that's it and it's over, end of story from one study. I mean, this was an incredibly fluid, changing situation where you had new strains developing, you had a variety of vaccines, you had different demographic cohorts, and what might be right for one demographic may not be right for another one. You layer on top of that a very fraught policy debate, entirely legitimate, whatever position, you personally agreed with. I think the balancing of, individual freedom and community responsibility, this was complex and entirely legitimate source of debate. So for these gigantic companies to feel like they had any role or say in defining the parameters of that debate, in being the arbiters of what the medical facts were when things were very fluid and very much still in debate over some of the most contentious issues, you can see how this was one of the most problematic roles that Twitter and other social media companies ultimately filled. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.